11, are you trying to call?
The cockpit is not answering their phone. Our number 1 has been staffed, and our 5 has been staffed.
I am going to call from Washington. I am in a situation with American is under possible hijack.
What's going on, Betty? The crap is erratic again. Problem, very erratic. Betty, talk to me. Betty, are you there? Betty? Betty?
The plane just hit the
What?
The 737.
It what?
The World Trade
Who are you
Center.
talking to?
Oh, God. Oh, my God.
United 175, New York. We have some problems over here right now. We might have a hijack over here, 2 of them.
Jules, this is Ryan. Lives on an airplane that's been hijacked. If things don't go well, and it's not looking good, I just want you to know I absolutely love you. I want you to do good. So have a good time. Same to my parents and everybody. And I just totally love you, and I'll see you later, Chester. Bye, babe.
What are those people going to do? All the elevators are blocked out.
Oh my God. So both towers are now.
Okay, I got an aircraft 6 miles east of the White House.
Crystal City, just north of Crystal City.
Just to the north of your town.
Yeah, stop all departures.
Pentagon just got hit. No for CNN. God damn it, I can't even protect my NCA.
United 93, that traffic for you is 1 o'clock, 12 miles eastbound 370.
Negative contact, we're looking United 93.
United 93, Cleveland, if you hear the center right then.
I got the pistol down. Keep remaining sitting. You have the ball board.
Tuesday, 9:47 a.m.
Hi, baby. Baby, you have to listen to me carefully. I'm on a plane that's been hijacked. I'm on the plane. I'm calling from the plane. I want to tell you I love you. Please tell my children that I love them very much. And I'm so sorry, babe. I hope to be able to see your face again, baby. I love you. Bye.
We're 56865. We have, I believe it is a Boeing 757. Can you see him up there, sir?
That's confirmed. It looks like he's rocking his wings.
Roger.
He's rocking back and forth.
Number 56865, I advise you stay away from that aircraft. Go north as fast as you can.
United 93, have you got information on that yet?
Yeah, he's down.
He's down?
Yes.
When did he land?
He did not land.
Oh, he's down?
Yes,
Down?
somewhere up northeast of Camp David.
Sean and me, I just want to let you know I love you, and I'm stuck in this building in New York. There's lots of smoke, and I just wanted you to know that I love you always.
At number 2 World Trade Center, right. Ladies and students in the dropping. We're not ready to die, but it's getting bad.
I'm on the 83rd floor. I'm gonna die, aren't I? No. Say I'm gonna die.
Liv, say your prayers. We're gonna think positive because you gotta help each other get off the floor.
I'm
Now,
gonna die.
A new type of war. That's what it is. Frank, you're upside down.
I look on my screen. I look like I'm right side up. Let me see if I can do anything.
Tell you what, that's still chilling 19 years later. Hi, Phyllis.
Hi, how are you guys?
I'm good.
Yeah, chilling. You were right on my screen, Frank. Lou, what have you been drinking?
Right? Everybody else is okay. I don't even drink.
Oh, well, we'll start, and then maybe he'll be right side up.
I can't hear Patsy. Can anybody else hear Patsy?
No, I didn't hear him either.
Well, it's because I had my mic off.
Oh, that would explain it.
Explain it. Phil, I got something to show you before we leave.
All right.
Before we kill it, okay? I saved it just for you.
And thanks for keeping me on my workout this week.
Well, you know, I was doing that on purpose because I was trying to do stories instead of like the normal one.
But you know, I was in LA, so you were making me work out at 5 o'clock.
That's when I work out.
Well, you were making me, whenever I was seeing your stories, it was 5 there, so I wasn't going to work out at 3 a.m.
You guys know when we were kids, whenever Frank and I were kids, well, 3 out of 4 of us were kids, sorry.
He likes to throw that in there.
I can remember talking to folks who were old enough to remember the Kennedy assassination. Okay, and well, yes, there you go. In fact, you were probably one of the folks I talked to, and I would always hear the same thing from them all the time. I would always hear the same thing. Every person I talked to, and I can't tell you how many there were, and it didn't matter who they were, what part of town they were from, what state they were from. There was no common demographic other than their age. And they would be able to tell me some of the dumbest things that happened that day, what they were wearing, every conversation they had. They remembered it like it was yesterday. And I always thought they were full of shit. Until September 11th, 2001. And to this day, I can remember in such detail everything that happened that day, every conversation that I've had, everything we've done, and we're all going to talk about that. Like it happened a minute ago. I can't remember what Frank and I talked about yesterday. But I can remember everything about that day. Literally everything. And just the total impact it had on everything around us and everything we're doing. I don't know if anybody else had that same recollection, but I mean, it's frightening how much detail I can remember.
Yes, I remember. I know people always say this, like you. I had always heard people say, I remember it like it was yesterday. I can tell you exactly what I was doing, how I was feeling. I can tell you how I got to work that morning. I can tell you the first person that told me. I was actually a professor at the time, and I taught an early morning class. And for some reason, so I had been in a terrible car wreck on August 10th, so a month before. So I had not driven a car. I had really bad injuries to my leg, so had not driven, was walking really slow. And for some reason that morning, I taught an 8 o'clock class, and I let them go early. I don't know why. I let them go early. I was fatigued. I didn't really feel like getting through the class. And when we were coming out of the class, of course, the students were excited to get out of class, so they rushed on, and I'm walking slow because I had been in this bad car wreck. One of my legs was really damaged, so I was kind of walking with a limp and really dragging my leg. And this student came toward me. I will always remember what this student had on. And he said, "Hey, Professor, you okay?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm going slow. I was in a car wreck a month ago." And he said, "Oh, well, a plane just hit a building in New York." And I remember my first response was, people have got to stop flying these little planes because they're running in the buildings. And I go to my office. I was also the director of the Multicultural Center on campus. So I go to my office, and we had big TVs and we had computers in the center. And I was walking, of course, so slow because I was injured. I get in the center. I remember turning the TV on in the main room where everybody could see. I also had a TV in my office, and the TV was probably on for 2 minutes, and the second plane hit. And it was, surreal, just surreal. And I'll always remember that feeling, that because I think all of us were in shock at first. We really didn't know what we were watching as it was unfolding. I had never experienced anything like that. I don't think any of us had ever experienced. We talk about the Kennedy assassination. Obviously, my background, everybody remembers where they were when King was assassinated. And so I had heard people say, I remember where I was. And of course, they didn't have the technology that we had. We were watching it in real time. People that told me about the King assassination were saying, when the word got to us. But we were literally watching this event unfold. And I don't think we'll ever forget that moment. I don't care. That's one event. I don't care what your socioeconomic class was, your race was. It hit us hard. I don't think anybody did not know somebody who lived and worked in New York, did not know somebody who lived and worked in D.C. at the time, did not know somebody who flew. For those of us who travel often, we were probably just off of a plane. I had just, I didn't travel as much as I travel now, or as much as I traveled before the pandemic, but I had just been on a plane a few weeks before, right before I was in the car accident. So, just unbelievable.
Unbelievable. Linwood, your turn.
You know what? I was working for Coca-Cola at the time, and I was up in Niles, Ohio, and we were in a store, probably, I think, putting up a display of some sort, because Tuesdays on the route I was on, that's when you did the display work, the heavier stuff, just because of the grocery store chains. And I remember a guy coming in from Nabisco, and he said, a jetliner just hit the World Trade Center. And we're like, get out of here. Where'd you hear that? It was almost like you didn't believe him. And then every bit of news reports started coming in, and it's like, okay, they hit, the second one got hit, then the Pentagon got hit. Then it was Flight 93, and what was strange about 93 is it actually made a loop over Youngstown and Niles. I don't know if you realize that. From where it took off on, they turned it, and it came back over Pennsylvania. It was actually caught by the Youngstown Tower and the Pittsburgh Tower, and I believe the Cleveland Tower. They were tracking it. And you know what? And I still believe to this day, and I don't believe it is a conspiracy theory. Remember that part of the clip where they showed that F-16 on the tail of 93? That night on the Pittsburgh News, I can still remember this clear as day. There was 2 eyewitnesses to watching that plane go down, and both eyewitnesses said, I only saw this one time, it was never played again. They said, we saw the plane, we saw the F-16 fighter, we saw the F-16 launch and hit that plane. And that plane, it hit the back end of that plane, probably heat seeker, hit the engine. They said we saw it wobble and nosedive, about 5-10 miles from where they were, from where they saw it get hit and go down into that field. And what was strange about that is knowing some people at the state. My brother was a state trooper. There was actually some people that I knew were in that vicinity that worked for the Commonwealth, and they said everything they knew that they talked to that day, it was shot down. Do I blame Cheney for making that call? No, I can't. I could not. It had to be a tough decision if they really had to do that. How would you like to be in that position? Because Bush was not available.
Yeah, he was.
Yeah, and did you know at that point when he made that call, did you know it was right after that until they knew everything settled down? Do you know where he was that day? Because I know the guy that saw him. They flew him into Butler Airport, Pennsylvania. Small plane. Do you know where that government facility is near Slippery Rock? And I can't think the name of it.
Yeah.
It's a very secure facility. He was in there.
Wow.
Iron Mountain, I can't think of what the name of that is there. But it's a government secure facility to this day yet. It goes about, I don't know how far back into that mountain.
Yeah. They keep all the records in there. They do. There's a lot of Department of Defense stuff that goes on in there, and there's a lot of people that do background checks from inside of there. It's just,
Frank, you're up.
So,
and I still believe that because, that was the time before you could record everything quick without a VCR and stuff. I remember sitting there watching that report come across. It was like the 5 o'clock news. It was KDKA, and I still remember that one time, and it was never seen again.
Yeah, I vaguely remember hearing about that as well, not seeing the news report itself, but I vaguely remember hearing other folks talk about that. I was working, I think it was the last few days maybe, before I started my own private practice. I was in a private practice, I was a partner in a firm. I had a hearing that was going to take place in Pittsburgh in the federal building that day. I remember hearing the first report on the radio, thinking it was pretty strange. For whatever reason, I think it was reported on the report that I heard. They weren't sure the type of plane, but that they thought it was a commercial airliner, jet airliner. And then when the second one hit, not that long after that, my immediate thought was, we're under attack. So I called the hearing office down in Pittsburgh, and I said, are we still having this hearing today? It's a federal building. And they said, they didn't know what I was talking about. They didn't have any clue what was going on. And I said, yeah, we saw this hearing. They said, absolutely, you're scheduled to be here, you need to be here. I said, well, you do know that 2 planes hit the World Trade Centers today. And they said, no, so what? I said, well, I think we're under attack. And they said, well, they probably saw some kind of coup, you know what I mean? And so my wife at the time said, you're not going down there, period. And I was like, well, we'll see what happens. When the Pentagon hit, I got a call back from the office, the judge's chambers. And he said, Yeah, our hearing's canceled. Everybody's going home. And I said, okay, thank you for the call. So that's my vivid memory of that day. There's a lot of other stuff, just disbelief and shock, and sitting in front of the TV watching some of those images that we saw in that video. Just being angry and frustrated. There was a lot of emotion. Still brings a lot of emotion. We got a nice comment from Luca there. That's great. He says hello to you, Phyllis. So in any event, I remember that. I also remember that my daughter was just under 2 years of age at that time, and I was thinking, what is this world, that we just brought this little kid into, And Patsy, your son must have been about that same age, probably around 2 years old, right? At the time.
Nick was born in 2000, so he was one, the end of July. Okay, in 2000.
Yeah, so my daughter was over. It was about let's see, it was about 18 days before her second birthday. So yeah, it was shocking, obviously, and I was just thinking of her as a dad, thinking, what do we have ahead?
I was working for the county engineer at the time. In fact, our drafter, we graduated with our drafter, Dan Nero, Frank.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting in an office with him, and his phone rings, and his wife was on the phone. And I hear them going back and forth a little bit, and he hangs up and he looks at me. He goes, "You're not going to believe this shit." What's up, man? He goes, and I swear he said this. He goes, "Some asshole just ran into the World Trade Center." And I said, "With what?" And he said, "An airplane." I said, "You got to be kidding me." He said, "No." He said, "It's on the news." So we go into one of our structural engineers' office, and at the time he had one of those little tiny, like 5-inch black and white TVs. Okay, I don't know if you guys remember those, and I was teeny little shit and thing. And we both go in his office, and he looks at us and he goes, "What's the matter?" We're like, "Bill, turn your TV on. You're not going to believe somebody hit the World Trade Center." And he said the same thing. "With what?" It's like a plane. So by the time we got, because it was just an antenna, by the time we got something tuned in that he could watch, wasn't 2 minutes later, another plane hit. The second plane hit. And at that point, all three of us, and there was another engineer came in at the time, and so there were four of us, and all four of us at the same time were like, okay, that wasn't an accident. Okay, because up until that second plane hit, you're like, man, somebody had a bad night, right? And I don't know how the hell he didn't see one of those towers, but apparently he didn't. Because it's not like what we said earlier. It's not like it is today, where you see that today, you're immediately thinking that's an attack, right? Then you're thinking, holy shit, did this guy drink a lot last night? So the second one hits, and all of us are like, okay, that's not an accident. This is intentional. So we're trying to figure out what the hell's going on and who's doing what and the whole thing. And back and forth. So by this time, you got like 6 engineers and the drafter huddled around a little 5-inch TV. And I look at Bill, and he looks at me, and I got this real confused look on my face. And he said, "What's the matter?" And I said, "Why the hell didn't it fall yet?" Because by that point, the way that those buildings were constructed, that's a whole engineering class in and of itself. Because, I mean, it was very unique the way that the thing was built. And he looked at me and he goes, "It's not going to last much longer. There's too much heat in there. Everything's melting." And I said, "Well, then a lot of people are dead." And he said, "Oh, yeah." Because, you weren't getting out. The elevators and everything were shut down, and the stairwells were very, very narrow. It was like, yeah, no. And one of the other guys were like, "Yeah, well, what about everybody running in?" And we were like, "Oh, yeah." And then they just dropped. My wife calls, and she says, "County's evacuated. We got to get out. We got to get out of the building, because if we don't get out in like 2 minutes, we're locked in. Because especially at a prison, right? They just shut it down. They don't give a shit who's in there." They're shutting it down at 10 o'clock, doors are locked. You're stuck in there, you're there until they open. Right? So she's like, I'm out, I'll see you. And then that night just went on forever. The night just went on forever. They were scared, man, because you didn't know what the hell was happening next. Then we found out about the Pentagon getting hit. And then we're like, oh, uh-oh, now what? And then it was Shanksville was the one that Lou had talked about. And we're like, what's next? What's happening next? Years later, I worked for the firm that actually engineered the memorial over at the Flight 93 Memorial, so I spent a boatload of time there. But I'm home, I'm watching TV, and I look over at my son, who's, one in a month, he's 13 months old. And I looked at my wife and I said, he's never going to know the world that we know, or knew. He's never going to know it now. And she's like, nope, everything just changed. It's funny.
Looking back on it now, the things that we've learned to adapt to and live with that flowed from that. One more thought of the day, though. I can remember after the plane went down in Shanksville, Flight 93. I remember there were other flights that they were tracking to see, what other flights are in the air, and that's something else that I can remember too. Just wondering, is there anything else? Is there going to be another flight that hits? Is there going to be something else that happens? And then one by one, they kept taking them off the board. What landed where, and then eventually there was maybe like one or two flights left up in the air, and then they landed, and that was it. And then I remember air travel was shut down for at least 24 hours, maybe a little bit longer.
I think it was longer than that.
It was at least a week.
Yeah, it was a week easy.
Because remember, all the international flights were diverted to Canada.
Mm-hmm.
And those
that was surreal.
That got stuck in Canada had a hell of a time getting out of there.
Yeah, and then how much we changed how we. I mean, it wasn't. You could remember going to the airport with your friends and loved ones when they would go on a flight, and you'd walk them to the gate.
Yeah,
right to you go all the way to the gate. Yeah.
I wanted. So the month before, I have a little brother who is, I call him little, if he ever sees this, he hates when I say that. He's my baby brother, but he's really young enough to be my son. But so I took him on his first plane ride a month before September 11th. Actually, I was coming back from that trip when I was in the bad car wreck. I had driven to our hometown in Jackson, Tennessee, got him, took him on a flight, and then was driving back to my home in Lexington, Kentucky at the time. But one thing that really hits me is that was his first plane ride. It was like he came back about August 10th. And so he has never known flying but with that, because he doesn't really remember the first plane ride. So he's never, for instance, known flying without having to take your shoes off before pre-check, TSA pre-check started, or without your loved ones going to the gate. Meanwhile, I have another brother who we're only a year and a half apart, and I went to college in Atlanta, and the Atlanta airport was everything. We would go in college to the Atlanta airport just to eat dinner. Like, we just go through security just to go to the great restaurants. So there are all these pictures when I'm in college, if my other brother was traveling, where if he was traveling through Atlanta, and every flight goes through Atlanta in the South, where there are pictures of me at the gate with him when he's getting on the plane, me waving. And there are no pictures of us and our baby brother ever in an airport at a gate unless we're taking a flight together. And so it really hit me just how, depending on where you were at the time, how old you were at the time, what you did for a living at the time, how our lives have been drastically changed by that. We remember, obviously everybody on this remembers a time where we didn't take off shoes and everybody took you to the airport, mama, auntie, grandmama, and that's not so. And so it just really shows how our world has changed. And I remember just the eeriness of it as I said, I had been in a terrible car accident, but I ran this culture center on campus, and we actually had a speaker who was scheduled to come in the next day, and they shut down air travel. And so this woman, me, who was terrified to drive, we decided to still bring the speaker in because we thought he would be really beneficial at this time. He was stuck in Nashville, which is about 3 hours away from Lexington, Kentucky. And so that was the first time I had driven in 30 days. I drove to Nashville to get him. And I just remember it being so eerie. Almost nobody on the streets. And I did not have that feeling again until we had the pandemic, when nobody was on the highway, on the street. Like, I really remember when this pandemic started and I was out one day and I couldn't remember. I had deja vu, but I couldn't remember why. And I was like, I have not felt like this, so eerie, since that day that I was driving. You know, when you would stop at a convenience store that day, people would just didn't want to say anything. And I didn't have that feeling again until 2020, 19 years later. And this pandemic will change us forever too. You know, if anybody has young children now, they will know a world that we just did not experience. It's really just amazing.
Looking back on it, and it may take a minute, but what was the one thing that has changed in your life since that you wish you could have back? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
We'll start. Go ahead, Phil. We'll start with you.
I mean, I think definitely, you know, I'm 45 now, so I was, 24 at the time. And just, I think at 24 anyway, you're on that verge, even though you're technically an adult, you're on that line of still kind of childish and a child, you know, still asking parents for money, but trying to live this adult life. And I think another thing we talk about that people always say, and we say, oh, you're just bullshitting, but that my loss of innocence. Mm-hmm. And not that I had that much innocence, but, you know, my loss of security. I will never feel, you know, in that moment, so many things changed with security, not just about travel, about, you know, we had a financial crisis after that. We had so many things that changed. I am an attorney because of that, because we took some time off from work, and I took those days. I was off work. Well, I had to go in, but we closed the center. We just had our TVs running for people that wanted to come in. I took the 3 days we closed the center to prepare my law school application. So I applied from law school from the night of September 11th to that Friday. And I had thought about law school. I didn't have time to apply. I hadn't really thought serious. But that night I did my first application. Ironically, I did an application to Michigan that night. And that's where I ended up going to law school. But I think definitely the loss of innocence. I wish so many times that security and that innocence that we had. And don't get me wrong, I wasn't naive. I was born a black woman in America, so I wasn't that naive or that innocent. But there were just some things that you thought you would never have to deal with. I never thought I would have to be on a plane and say, you know, when you were on the plane, you just said, I hope the plane doesn't go down, just period. I never thought that I would have to say, I hope no one's hijacking the plane. I hope that, you know, that I don't have to try to fight to save other people's lives like the people on Flight 93 did. But definitely I wish I had the innocence and the security that we haven't had that since, I don't think.
What's yours?
You know what? When I think back on it, she almost nailed it, because you think that was almost the beginning of what I consider over-policing in a police state. I mean, I don't know if it's still in place. Frank or Phyllis, one of you two may know. For the longest time, technically, if you're within 200 miles of a border of our country, you can basically not have any constitutional rights, if I'm correct.
We don't have any constitutional right in the borders, but that's a different story for a different...
Okay, that's what I was wondering. because they could say, like, they could arrest me and say, you know what, you look Ukrainian and you're a Russian operative, and throw me in jail and not really give me any due process if I'm arrested under a certain code, right?
Yeah, that was really the rise in these security laws that really, obviously we need security, you know, we need, somebody said it earlier about they don't know if they would have made a different decision than Dick Cheney did, if in fact, you know, the theory is true. But that was really the rise in security laws and so many laws. Hey, we've got to keep America safe. So if you look a certain way, you can be profiled. You know, if you look a certain way, we can tap your phone. And I think it's just grown exponentially to so many different areas and fields. And who isn't for safety? And I think that's the tagline that so many have used to, in the years since, to discriminate against so many people unnecessarily.
That has been abused like crazy.
Yeah, I'm old enough to remember when you could disappear inside this country and people couldn't find you. And almost start a different life.
Frank, what's the one thing that changed for you?
Well, you know, I kind of agree with Phyllis. I think as a country we lost a sense of innocence and a sense of security and almost untouchability in a sense that way, and it's kind of flowed into the psyche. It's flowed into my psyche at times. I mean, you know, I always felt like we had this little safety, you know, and it was so fragile as you look back on it. You know, that we felt like we could just live, you know, this idyllic life here. And yes, it's not a perfect country. I've always known that. I've always known that from probably, you know, go back to 8th grade on. Maybe before 8th grade, I had a different view of our country. But after that, I started to realize the things that were going on in our country. But it wasn't the perfect country. But we certainly had some idyllic life here compared to the rest of the world. The loss of that really affected me. I can remember getting on planes to fly internationally and in different parts of the world that I had not flown before after 9/11, and looking at people for a number of years very skeptically. You know, it was personal. It wasn't that I wanted to be, you know, stereotyping people with certain dress and behaviors. But I can remember being on a flight with, I may have told you this story before, Patsy, but I was in Texas flying to Puerto Rico, and I was getting on a connecting flight in Dallas. I think I flew from El Paso to Dallas, and I was going to fly from Dallas to Puerto Rico. And I was in the airport, Dallas-Fort Worth, and I hear this familiar voice, and it's a kid that was from my neighborhood by the name of Lard Owens. That Lard's his nickname.
Yeah, I know Lard.
Yeah. So
I love Lard.
Yeah, he comes up to me, he's like, "What are you doing on this flight?" And I'm like, "Oh, I'm going to work for Tony McKay." He's like, "That's what I'm doing too." I was like, "Okay." He's like, "You know what? If we see anybody getting ready to take over this plane," he goes, "Me and you were going to tackle him, right?" And I was like, "Yeah." So we're walking around, and he's Newcastle through and through.
Yeah,
and he's got a very boisterous personality, right?
Oh, Lard has a presence. You know when he's in the room.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
he's walking around where the gate is, and people are seated there, and he's making it known to everybody. Me and my boy Frank are on this flight, and if anybody tries some shit, we're going to take you down. But it's funny, but it was also that fear that was manifesting itself, you know, because you had to almost feel like self-preservation in some ways all the time. And so, yeah, I missed that. I missed the security. Even though it was a false sense of security, I missed it.
His wife was a guard at the jail for the longest time.
Yeah.
And that's how I met him, because Lisa knew Shannon. Still does, and we still run into her every so often. Drank with him a couple of times, him and a couple other people. I had to get the hell out of there. I was like, holy shit, we're gonna get in trouble.
Drinking with him in Puerto Rico. I had this crew down there. This is a real quick sidebar. I had this crew down there that was just people that were, loving life, enjoying life to the fullest, and they were sent down to basically work on this parade route and fly these big helium balloons that are characters, like you see in the Macy's Day Parade, right? So all these folks are basically kind of getting a free trip to Puerto Rico to go train Puerto Ricans how to walk these balloons down the parade float, parade route. And everybody's out drinking the night before on the beach, and we've got to be up at 5 in the morning to go inflate the balloons, tie them off, and then start to teach people how to walk them down the street. And we wake up in the hotel and we start rounding people up, and these guys are like, F that, I'm not going anywhere. I'm hungover, I ain't going nowhere. F her, she can take her balloons and shove them up her, you know what. So I'm sitting there like, oh man, I gotta supervise these people. I gotta try to make sure that they go to the job site, and none of them are very happy about being woken up at like 4 in the morning. So I'm like, Lord, let's go. You know, we got to just get these guys going, and we'll convince them that maybe after the parade we'll go sit down by the pool or the beach, and drinks are on us. And he's like, all right. So we take them over to Burger King and we get some coffee for them. And he's like, dudes, I hate this. You know, I hate this shit too. I hate this shit. He's like, don't worry about it though. We got you. Just finish this parade, and we're drinking on the beach right after that. And they're grumbling. They're like, man, we can still drink on the beach anyway if we don't go to the parade. But we finally convinced them to go, and everything worked out. By the time we're halfway down the parade route, everybody's dancing. It's like Puerto Rican music playing. Everybody's dancing and jamming, and and all this stuff. And then I was like, it just had to get them to the site, and that was fine.
The one thing I miss is just being able to do something. I can remember, Lisa and I were married, probably 5 years, okay, whenever this happened. And if I had a medical problem, or she had a medical something, or somebody had to talk to somebody about something, and it was just, I'll just tell my wife, or just call my wife, or just talk, there wasn't, you didn't have any HIPAA anything, or very few, just tell my wife. You wanted to, wanted another bank account just to throw money in for Christmas or whatever. You just went down the bank, showed them the driver's license, and you're in, right? I mean, it was pretty much that simple. Okay, take $10 out of that account, put it in this one. Okay, that account's open now, and we'll start dropping. Just, I don't want to say freedoms, because that's not how it is, but just being able to just do things without having to jump through so many stupid fucking hoops, just to get through the day.
Yeah.
That's the part that we knew. Well, we kind of figured, okay, flying is going to be a hot mess for a while, right after that. We're like, okay, flying is going to be a hot mess, because we just, you just had the 4 planes. So we knew that was going to be a problem, or we figured it was going to be. But everything else that affected your life, just silly little things, right? You never thought twice about that. It's going to sound like an old man, but kids today just don't understand. Just how easy it was just to go. We would take weekend trips to Niagara Falls just to go. You know
what? I was just thinking that because my brother-in-law lived in Buffalo for a while. It's where my sister-in-law is from, and would go up there. And you used to be able to run back and forth across the border like it was Ohio or something.
Oh, yeah. You pick and choose where you get the best price, too, right? You either come across the States or something. Yeah. You just went across a bridge, that was it.
Yeah, I can remember crossing over that border like it was nothing, and they'd formally stop you, American citizen, yeah, where are you going? We're going to go eat dinner over here because we heard it's great. Oh, yeah, and they'd tell us what was on the menu, crossing the border, You got anything? Nah, go ahead, look if you want. It's nah, just go. And it was just a stop, and I don't know if anybody's been across there recently, but it's actually worse coming back to the United States than it is going into Canada. This is prior COVID, though, too.
Last time we went, Nick was probably 5 or 6, and even then, it was easy going to Canada. It was easy. They were the stereotypical Canadians, right? But coming home, we jumped through hoops coming home.
But I also think that events like September 11th, forced all of us to face our privileges. You know, for as much as we miss things, we still are so very privileged. And I think about it so much, although they are drastically different events, I think of it in terms of this pandemic. You know, I had somebody tell me about the pandemic the other day that, can you believe that you may not do anything wrong and you may get this virus and it'll kill you? And I said, oh, no shit. You could not do something wrong and be killed because of somebody else's selfishness. Oh, no shit. So even though September 11th, the country was under attack, one of the reasons that it so bothered me is because I was already under attack as a Black woman in so many other areas of my life. And I'm like, God damn, now they're even attacking the country that's already attacking me? Like,
deal with this shit too now.
This is a crude joke, and I hate to say it since I know this goes out, but my first flight was about a month after, and I remember saying when I got on the flight, half joking, but I was serious. I remember saying, hey, I'm Black in America. Shit is already bad for me. Please don't hijack this plane. And if you do, allow them to fly like at 2,000 feet and let me jump my ass out of here. And so I think it's the same thing with the pandemic. You know, so many people are just aghast, like, can you believe I lost my job? I'm like, join the club. I'm from a group of people who always lose their jobs and don't do anything wrong. Can you believe people are dying and it's not their fault? I mean, look at the number of people who just woke up that morning on a beautiful September morning and went to work. And their lives were cut shorter. Even if they did not die, lives were forever changed. And so it forced us to face so many privileges that we have, because we are just privileged where we just hop up and go to work and do our thing and don't have to worry. But there were people around this world who lived under the threat of terrorist attacks every day. Mm-hmm. You know, every single day. Where we grew up with having tornado drills. I'm from the South, so we had tornado drills just for no reason when I was young. You know, you get in the hall and have to do like this. But as I grew up, I met people who had bomb drills, and I could not imagine that. But September 11th made me see that there's a whole world out there. I was privileged to be able to get on a plane, to be able to cross over into Canada and barely flash my passport, you know, to be able to travel, to be able to not even need a passport. I remember on cruises, you didn't even need a passport to get on a cruise ship. You could just go to Miami and get a ticket and get on the cruise ship. So I think it forced so many of us to face our privileges, just like this pandemic is doing. And also one thing, you know, we haven't really discussed is the reason September 11th hit so many of us so hard is because of technology. Because if it had happened 20 years before, we would not have seen that in real time. We may have seen it on TV in real time. I can remember the internet being so slow that day because I was trying to like log on CNN.com, ABCnews.com, FoxNews.com, and I can just remember the pages taking so long to load. But they eventually loaded, and we saw that in real time. So even if you didn't have a TV, I can remember when I was taking that drive to get our speaker, and they were just playing it on the radio. And I'm somebody who always listens to music in the car, and I just was like, I have got to listen to a radio station. I was still naive when I got in the car to go get that speaker because I got in the car maybe hours after it happened. And I can remember saying, I hope I can hear broadcast of this the whole way. I didn't have to worry about that. Every station, hip hop, country, R&B, pop, had tuned out their regular programming and played that. So technology also allowed us to see it in real time. We didn't have, all of us saw George Bush read into those kids and that look on his face.
Yeah.
Where they whisper in his ear and he's like,
what? Yeah.
I didn't sign up for this.
Yeah.
My daddy didn't let me be president for this. And so I think just technology and our privilege is so at the forefront in this. Little did we know that 19 years later, we would experienced, again, something drastically different, but something with so many of the lessons in there. It's a lesson in privilege. It's a lesson in the power of technology. It's a lesson in the least of those will still get at the bottom of the totem pole in this thing. You know, we heard a lot about the firefighters that lost their lives and the first responders, but we did not hear, and we heard a lot about the people that worked in the financial companies in the World Trade Centers. But there were janitors in that building. Janitors who get there 4 hours before the lawyers and the financial people get in there. You know, the whole community's wiped out because of income loss. You know, God forbid, I don't want anything to happen to anybody on this broadcast. If all the lives lost are important that were lost on that day. But think about a life lost who has life insurance and a life lost who doesn't.
Right.
And so that just makes us, I have been so conscious since that time when I've traveled internationally, just, wow, some people live like this every day. Mm-hmm. Under the constant threat every day of this. And so I think that's one thing, if anything, and I'm not saying it's a good thing, but if anything, it forces us to face our privilege. And that's something that I've tried to do every day, even in this pandemic. For as bad as it gets to me, I say, but face your privilege. You're doing this pandemic in the house with a Manhattan. You're doing this pandemic with some guys that you like and that you can text and have fun with and still joke with in the midst of it. But there are some people who do not have this privilege. There are some people that did not have that privilege on September 11th.
Yeah, there's people that are hurting out there and they don't have a network to connect with, and they need people to be able to talk to, and it's difficult. We have a lot of privilege. It's a great point, Phyllis, about the technology also, because we lived it in the moment, and it was such a shock to us as it was going on. I fast forward to the pandemic too, and I think about a few different things. I was thinking about just what you were saying about privilege, and think about it in a lot of different ways. A couple of years ago, when I was in the little village that I have the fortune of being able to spend time in Italy, and there's a guy that lives in Florence there that comes to visit every August or so, and he stays with his family up there. And he was telling me in Italian, he said, in Italian, I love peace. I very much like peace. You know, I'm a peaceful person, and I'm a big proponent of peace in the world. And he said it with such passion and conviction. And I said, so do I, but why do you say that? You know, he said, when I was growing up, my grandma said to me, there's a factory in Florence that every day as the shift would end, there would be a siren that would go off to tell all the workers it's time for your shift to end. You know, the next shift comes on and they go home. He said when his grandma heard that siren, she always reacted. She always had a chill, and she would be upset.
Yeah.
And he asked his grandma, why is that? And she said, because in World War II, when I was a little girl, that siren meant that they were going to bomb us.
Yeah, that was an air raid.
Yeah. And it always meant that we could die. We could die at any moment when you heard that siren. And he said, so, you know, we live with that in Italy. We live with that in Europe. When we hear these sounds, it means something. It means something more than what it means to somebody else. So peace means something more to me than it means somewhere else.
Yeah.
And that's something that we don't realize here. And I fast forward to our pandemic, and you see these people who walk around selfishly and say, I'm not wearing a mask. I don't believe in this, blah, blah, blah. You can't put a mask on and wear it for your neighbor. You can't put a mask on and wear it for your fellow citizen to protect them. What if we had to hear those sirens?
Yes.
What if we had to be under that? Would we all be together and be able to do it? Would we be able to do it as a country united? I mean, we're so spoiled and so privileged, as you said, that we can't even put a mask. Not we, these four people that are on this show, but we as a society can't even count on our brothers and sisters to put on a mask for us.
It's a selfishness factor that we have. Half of it is our privilege, and half of it is just we cannot step outside of ourselves to think about how someone else lived. One of my other big memories from September 11th, as I said, I was a professor, but I also ran this cultural center. And before I was leaving out to have to drive for the first time in 30 days, two of my students came into the center. So this was a few hours after they were in one of my classes, but they were from an Arabic country. And this was by the time all few hours after, so we were starting to speculate on what happened, but they knew. And they came in and said, and I said, oh, I'm leaving, but you can stay in and watch the TV. And I can remember them saying, we don't want to go home tonight. And I was like, home is the place that I wish I was. I wish I didn't have to drive on the interstate. Why don't you want to go home? And they were scared because at this time the rumors had started, you know, all people were saying was Muslims did this or Arabic people did this. And they were literally scared to go home. And I can remember saying, I just wish I could get home, but I couldn't because I had to drive. And then, you know, it just showed me to step out of myself. I could not imagine, you know, and they were saying, we're just scared to go home. And so I think, you know, that has continued in our country. There are many of us who are scared to go home, scared to go to work, scared to drive, scared to show up in a neighborhood where nobody looks like us. And that's a real, you know, September 11th, it exposed our country's vulnerabilities, but it also exposed our country's hate in so many ways.
It started to, yeah. I think it started to bring it out.
In so many ways, it exposed our hate. And it was a hate that had been underlying, just like in this current climate, a person that shall remain unnamed but sits in the White House, that's giving people comfort and hating people. September 11th gave people an excuse to hate people. And I think we will not truly heal until we face that. And I don't know if I'm that optimistic. I'm probably one of the most hopeful people you'll ever meet, one of the most optimistic people you'll ever meet, but I don't know if we'll ever truly be able to face that until we face the fact that we are truly a hateful country.
Oh, I think we're starting. I hope it continues, but I think with a lot of the demonstrations and the movements and things that we've been seeing, at least there's a portion of us who are starting to acknowledge it.
Yeah, it's an acknowledgement. I think it's still too much. You know, there are too many people that still think, oh, that just happened there. You know, George Floyd, that just happened in his city.
Yeah.
You know, it doesn't happen to us. And I still think until there's a bigger segment of the population that says, like, this is our reality. You know, in the past 3 weeks, I have had somebody threaten to call the police on me because they did not believe I belonged in my office building. By the way, my firm is called Ramsey Law, and my name is Phyllis Ramsey. So,
do the math.
Days after that, my brother was accosted because they did not believe he belonged at a car dealership where he was taking his car to be repaired. And then a few days after that, other family members were accosted in their neighborhood when they were throwing trash away because Karen did not believe that they lived in the neighborhood. So we are constantly under attack. I think one of the saddest things about September 11th is that even since that day, I have never had a moment that I did not feel under attack since that day. And there are so many of us who have never felt like we have not been under attack since that day. And I readily admit that I have so many privileges and so many other people do not have. So if I feel constantly under attack, can you imagine, you know, what other people feel?
Yeah. Well, hopefully.
Yeah, hope. We must. If we don't have hope, I think we would all be up out of here. I mean, I don't think we could live through the depression that is this time if we did not at least have just the minutia of hope.
I think you made a good point about having people that you can lean on, that you can, you know, hang out with, even if it's just bitching for a little bit.
Yeah, or just.
Before we go, Phil, the one thing I wanted to tell you, I got a delivery today.
All right.
Okay, I got a delivery today. Well, I thought of you whenever I got it because it's a brown liquid.
Oh.
And I know
you have gifts for all of you all.
I know your affinity for brown liquids. Okay, so I got it, and I wanted you to see it. Okay.
Ah! Yes.
There was only 120 casks made. So if you can get a bottle of it, get it. You're not going to be disappointed.
I definitely will. Listen, it's that time. We need it. These days, I'm walking around with this. So so my big news is I took my first flight since the pandemic started.
How was it?
I will send you guys pictures. I had on 2 masks and I put a blanket over my head for the entire 4-hour flight. So the flight attendant comes by and she says, "Ma'am, we need you to move the blanket so we can see that your seatbelt is on." The actual flight was not bad. Surprisingly, everybody was, I think, still really conscious. So, for instance, when we landed, you know how people jump up? Nobody jumped up and everybody was like, "You go first." No, you go first. In the airport, I just kept my distance from everyone. You know, I just kept my... So it wasn't bad. I went to LA, so that's a long flight. So it wasn't bad. There is no food service, no liquor service on the flight. They give out water, and it really cuts down on people having to go to the bathroom and things. So it was not bad. Not bad at all. So my flight was a little over 4 hours. Kept my mask on. I kept the 2 masks on the whole time. I had to go to the bathroom once. I had everything. Of course, I'm an over-prepared person, so I had Clorox wipes. I had like travel Lysol, but it wasn't bad. I was more exhausted than I usually am after flight, and I think it was just from the anxiety.
Well, if things would clear out, Phyllis, and we're back, our industry's back into the meetings again. The annual meeting next year is in Nashville, beginning of May.
Hey, I will be hosting an event for you all then.
If I end up down there, I'll look you up. I'll have to get your number off of somebody here.
You gotta have real hot chicken. You gotta have real whiskey. And Nashville is not Nashville if you don't just walk down the street with me and go into every bar. So hopefully next year, we may not go into every bar, but we at least can go outside of every bar and have a shot and keep walking.
Folks, I think we're going to call it a day. Thank everybody for joining us. It was a rather somber show today, but at least we ended it on a high note. I had no big deal. Thank you everybody for joining us. We will be back tomorrow, same bat time, same bat channel. So until then, everybody, goodbye.
Monday.
Goodbye, good luck, and God bless. We'll see everybody tomorrow. Bye-bye.